Welcome, my friends, to a place where we share inspiration and positivity. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're thrilled to have you here as we tackle Royal Malay Regiment. The Royal Malay Regiment, Jawi, is the premier unit of the Malaysian Army's 3 infantry regiments. At its largest, the Malay Regiment comprised 27 battalions. At present, 3 battalions are parachute-trained and form part of the Malaysian Army Rapid Deployment Force. Another 3 battalions have been converted into mechanized infantry battalions, while the remaining battalions are standard light infantry. The 1st Battalion Royal Malay Regiment acts as the ceremonial foot guards battalion for the King of Malaysia, and is usually accompanied by the central band of the Royal Malay Regiment. As its name suggests, the regiment only recruits ethnic Malays. With our curiosity piqued, let's embark on a dedicated exploration of history and its fascinating intricacies. Beginning in 1920, local rulers in British Malaya, led by Sultan Iskandar Sultan of Perak, Syangku Muhammad Yang di Pertuan Besar of Negeri Sembilan, Raja Chulun Perak Royalty and Abdullah Dahan Undang of Remba urged Britain's colonial office to raise an infantry regiment from the colonial population. During this period, British and Indian troops, including the Burma Rifles, were stationed in Malaya for internal security duties. On 23 November 1932, the War Office approved the formation of the Malay Regiment as a British Colonial Auxiliary Forces unit consisting of British officers and Malay and other ranks. Shortly afterwards, on 23 January 1933, the Federated Malay States passed the Malay Regiment Act, which stipulated that $70,000 of government funds would be used to purchase the Kong Sang rubber estate in Port Dickson and convert it into a military recruit training center for the regiment's new recruits. On 1 February 1933, 25 Malayans were chosen from 1,000 applicants to serve in the 1st Company of the regiment. A month later, on 1 March, the company was officially formed in Port Dickson under Commanding Officer G. McBruce and his adjutant, Captain Kelvin G. Igsam. The regiment's regimental sergeant major was A. East McCarthy, and East Oldfield served as its quartermaster sergeant. Since the company was solely an attempt to find out how the Malays would react to military discipline, it was designated as the 1st Experimental Company. On 1 January 1935, the company was expanded into a regiment with 150 personnel. Recruitment efforts for the unit proceeded to accelerate, and a further 232 recruits were formed into 2 rifle companies and a headquarters section which included a Vickers machine gun platoon, a signallers section and a corps of drummers. By 1 January 1938, the regiment had a complement of 17 British officers, 6 Malayan officers, 11 warrant officers and 759 non-commissioned officers and other ranks. In the lead-up to World War II, the regiment's training intensified with more frequent and longer marches and exercises at both regimental and brigade level. The regiment also began training with mortars and anti-tank weapons. In March 1941, Governor Shenton Thomas authorized an increase of the regiment's size to 2 battalions, which along with the 2nd Battalion of the British Army's Loyal Regiment North Lancashire formed the 1st Malaya Infantry Brigade. 5 months later, a Bren gun carrier platoon was formed under Captain R. Celsius Carter and began training with the 2nd Loyal Regiment. In the next phase, we'll be immersing ourselves in the realm of Battle of Pasir Panjang Ridge and exploring its real-world applications. The first clash between the Malay Regiment and the Imperial Japanese Armed Forces occurred on 13 February 1942 at around 1400 was when the Japanese 18th Division attacked the southwestern coast along the Pasir Panjang Ridge and across Air Raja Road. That morning, the Japanese 56th Infantry Regiment, with considerable artillery support, attacked. The company of 1st Battalion, Malay Regiment, defending their position on the ridge came under heavy fire from Japanese troops supported by artillery and tanks and were forced to retreat to the rear. However, before their withdrawal was complete, the Japanese broke through B Company's position, inserting the entire company. When their ammunition ran out, B Company fought on savagely in hand-to-hand combat using bayonets. Captain Yazid Ahmad of the Federated Malay States Volunteer Force, on secondment to the Malay Regiment, took over B Company. They were reduced owing to mounting officer casualties, in a heroic and glorious last stand eclipsing the later achievements of 2nd Lieutenant Adnan Saidi. Captain Yazid died where he stood at the head of his men. A few soldiers from B Company managed to break out from the encirclement while other survivors were captured and became prisoners of war. The company's destruction triggered an immediate night withdrawal of both the 44th Indian and 1st Malaya Brigade to the general line running from Mount Echo at the junction of Ayer Raja and Depot Road to Buona Vista. In this part of the video, we'll be diving deep into Battle of Bukit Chandu and unraveling its profound impact. On 14 February, the Japanese launched a further heavy attack at 830 hours, supported by intense mortar and artillery fire, on the front held by the 1st Malaya Infantry Brigade. The fighting included bitter hand-to-hand combat with heavy losses on both sides. At 1600 hours, an attack supported by tanks eventually succeeded in penetrating the left flank where the defenders were forced back to a line from the junction of the Ayer Raja and Depot Road through the brickworks and along the canal to Bukit Chermin. Owing to the failure of units on both its flanks to hold their ground, the 1st Malaya Infantry Brigade withdrew at 1430 hours. At this point, the Malay Regiment's Celsius Company were ordered to move to a new defence position. 226 at Bukit Chandu. Had the Japanese gained control of the hill and ridge that overlooked the north of the island, it would have given them direct passage to the Alexandra area where the British Army had its main ammunition and supply depots, a military hospital and other key installations. 2nd Lieutenant Adnan Saidi and his men of 7 Platoon, Celsius Company of the 1st Malay Regiment made their well-known final stand against the Japanese attack on Bukit Chandu, now being commemorated as Reflections at Bukit Chandu. Saidi's bravery was exemplified in the battle where he was killed along with many of the Malay Regiment in the last defensive battle at Pasir Panjang. His motto by Push Tulang Jangan Push motto is still remembered. The translation loosely means, "It is better to die fighting than to live crying in regret till the eyes becomes blind." In other words, death before dishonor. Separated from D Company by a big canal on fire with oil flowing from Normanton Depot, Celsius Company were prevented from retreating further south. Celsius Company Commander Captain Ricks died during the early part of the engagement, whereupon command automatically passed to Saidi. The Japanese troops pressed their attack on Bukit Chandu in the afternoon. As a ruse, they sent a group of soldiers dressed in captured Indian Army uniforms who attempted to pass themselves off as Punjabi troops. However, Saidi saw through the ruse as Indian soldiers marched in threes and Japanese troops marched in fours. When the disguised soldiers reached the Malay Regiment's defence line, Celsius Company's squad opened fire with their Lewis guns, killing some and badly wounding the rest. Those who survived rolled and crawled downhill to save themselves. 4 of the top marksmen in the previous year's military competition held in Singapore were men from Celsius Company. 2 hours later, the Japanese launched an all-out assault in great numbers despite being within point-blank range of the Australian artillery. To save ammunition, the artillery did not open fire, a maneuver that greatly surprised the Japanese. The shell that had been saved by the Australian artillery was handed over to the Japanese army the next day when General Percival surrendered Singapore to General Yamashita. The Malay Regiment was soon overwhelmed by the attack. Although greatly outnumbered and short of ammunition and supplies, they continued to put up resistance. Reports claimed that Saidi manned the Lewis gun, others engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat using only bayonets. Nevertheless, the troops stood their ground and frustrated the Japanese. Saidi was seriously wounded but refused to retreat. Instead, he encouraged his men to fight to the last, showing a disregard for personal danger that inspired the company to fight on. Sadie was later captured and tortured before being bayoneted to death. On 28 February 1942, 4 captive Malay Regiment officers were executed by firing squad in Pasir Panjang for refusing to join the Japanese Army when instructed to do so by a Malaysian collaborator, Major Mustafa Hussain of the Fahrenheit Kikun. They were Lieutenant No Arifin Sulaiman, Lieutenant No Abdul Wahid Jidin, Lieutenant No Abdullah Sod and Lieutenant No Ibrahim Sidek. Lieutenant Omar Nurin of a company, 1st Battalion, was executed earlier on 15 February 1942, while Lieutenant Muhammad Isa Mahmud of HQ Company, 1st Battalion, was executed on 12 February 1943. Most of the surviving captured Malay Regiment officers defected or joined the Imperial Japanese Army. During the Malayan campaign, primarily between 12-14 February 1942 in Singapore, the Malay Regiment suffered a total of 159 killed, 6 British officers, 7 Malaysian officers, and 146 other ranks, and a large but unspecified number wounded. On the whole, the British were not convinced that the Malays were a martial race in view of the widespread desertions among Malay Regiment troops, leading to most of the remaining Malaysian soldiers being disarmed before they entered Johor and were ordered home. A small corps of well-trained and loyal Malaysian officers and non-commissioned officers fought to the end in the defense of Singapore. Get ready for an exciting part as we dive into reconstruction during the British military administration. By mid-1946, the idea of a multiracial Malay regiment, raised after the war, had been dropped due to opposition from state rulers and governments. The all-Malay Malay Regiment would become part of a Federation Army of divisional strength, thereby freeing up British regiments for other more strategic duties. The British plan to develop a strategic reserve of 3 brigades held in Britain would require the raising of more local regimental strength. The Overseas Defence Committee thereafter endorsed a gradual expansion of the Malay Regiment to 6 battalions by 1950, whereby the Malay Regiment would be used mainly for internal security, with multiracial formations in the supporting arms. But in fact, by 1954 it reached 7 battalions at the height of the emergency. As we progress, let's zoom in on the Malayan emergency and examine its role in shaping our overall narrative. By 1948, the British Army had 7 partially reformed Gurkha battalions in Malaya, in addition to 2 battalions of the Malay Regiment. By mid-1948, only 3 British battalions remained in Malaya to provide security to the Federation. The Malay Regiment also played a major role against the Malayan National Liberation Army MNLA when an eventual 7 battalions served during the Malayan emergency, with the 3rd Battalion, which was raised in 1948. During the campaigns, privates carried a no service rifle in sporting guise to hide it for jungle warfare. A sling swivel on the side of the butt was one feature. Another was the flash eliminator on the muzzle, designed to mask firing with a bayonet to affix. The regiment gained the Royal prefix in 1960 when many of its officers were still trained at Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. It became the Royal Malay Regiment and by 1961 had a strength of 11 battalions. The Sovereign's colours were received in 1963, 7 years after Malaysia became an independent country. Now, let's shift our attention to Indonesian confrontation. During the confrontation, the Royal Malay Regiment were also deployed in Sabah and Sarawak. During this deployment, the Calabacan incident occurred on 29 December 1963. An outpost in Calabacan in Tawau, established and manned by members of Celsius Company of the 3rd Battalion under the command of Maj Zainal Abidin bin Haji Yaakob, was ambushed by volunteers of the North Kalimantan Army while performing their Maghrib prayers. The company reacted and stood to, and were finally able to repel the attacking force. However, 7 members of the company, including Major Zainal Abidin, were killed and 16 others wounded. As we progress, let's zoom in on Malayan Special Forces in Congo and examine its role in shaping our overall narrative. The 4th Royal Malay Regiment under the command of Lt. Col. Unku Nazaruddin formed the core of the Malayan Special Force that served under UN command in the Congo in 1960. In turn, the 6th Royal Malay, 7th Royal Malay and 2nd Royal Malay also served in the Congo under UN command. 2nd Royal Malay ended the Congo deployment on 28 April 1963 when they returned home. Now, let's shift our focus to Somalia and embark on an intellectual exploration of its various dimensions. As part of the United Nations UNOSOMII operation in Somalia, the 19th Royal Malay Regiment Mechanist started deployment of its 870 members in Mogadishu from 18 June 1993. The battalion was involved in the combat rescue of U.S. Army Rangers during the Battle of Mogadishu together with Pakistan Army's 10th Battalion of the Balok Regiment, where the battalion provided the Radpanzer Condor armoured personnel carriers for the QRF force of the 10th Mountain Division that effected the rescue. One member of the battalion, a driver of one of the UKs, Private Matt Asman, posthumously promoted to corporal, was killed and 4 UKs destroyed during the rescue. Let's transition to Bosnia and Herzegovina and uncover its significance. 23rd Royal Malay and 3rd Armour formed MALBATTI as part of the United Nations Protection Force and started deployment in September 1993. 23 Royal Malay served until August 1994 and were replaced by MALBATTI comprising 5 Royal Malay and 2nd Armour. MALBATTII 28 March 1995 November 1995 was formed from 12 Royal Malay and 1st Armour. Malkan 1 to Royal Ranger Regiment and 4th Armour, Malkan 2 18 RMR and 2nd Armour, Malkan 4 to RMR and 1 Armour. As we progress, let's zoom in on regimental crest and examine its role in shaping our overall narrative. The regiment's crest depicts a pair of tigers supporting an oriental crown. Within the circle of the crest are a kris and a scabbard with the regimental motto Tsetia written in Jawi, meaning loyal and true. Major G. McKee. South. Bruce and Captain Kelvin G. Igzam, the founding officers of this regiment, designed the crest. 3 colours were chosen: green the Muslim colour, yellow for Malay royalty and red for the British Army influence. As we progress, let's shine a spotlight on Royal Guards and examine its intricate interplay within our topic. Istana Negara, Kuala Lumpur. As we transition to the next segment, let's unravel the mysteries surrounding battle honours and gain a fresh perspective. Second World War, Tanah Malay, Singapore 1942 Dorit confrontation with Indonesia, Battle of Mogadishu, Somalia, Bosnia, Namibia, Cambodia, Republic of the Congo, Leopoldville, East Timor, Operation Astute 2006, Lahad Datu 2013. As we enter this new chapter, let's navigate the complexities of UN peacekeeping missions and unravel its multifaceted nature. Democratic Republic of the Congo, UN Peacekeeping Namibia, UN Peacekeeping Cambodia, UN Peacekeeping Mission, UNTAC Bosnia and Herzegovina, UN Peacekeeping. Now, let's shift our perspective and explore alliances through a fresh lens, unlocking new perspectives. The Royal Australian Regiment, the Royal Anglian Regiment, 1st the Duke of Lancaster's Regiment, King's Lancashire and Border, 2nd the Royal Welsh, 4th the Royal Scots Borderers, 5th the Rifles, 6th the Royal Gurkha Rifles, the Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment, 7th. Prepare yourself for an eye-opening discussion on battalions in the upcoming portion of this video. The RAMD has a total of 27 battalions. 21 of these are standard light infantry battalions, with 3 rolled as mechanized infantry and 3 as parachute infantry. The final battalion is a support unit. In this chapter, we'll be unraveling the enigma of 1st Battalion Royal Malay Regiment and discovering its transformative power. The 1st Royal Malay is the most senior infantry battalion of the regiment and the first to be raised. This was also the battalion group to which Lieutenant Adnan bin Saidi was posted. In 2008, the 1st Battalion became the first all-Muslim unit to provide the Queen's Guard at Buckingham Palace, as well as the first guard from a nation that was not a Commonwealth realm. Its primary role is more towards ceremonial functions, as the representative of the nation's defense element in becoming the guard of honor during a state visit. They are tasked to guard the National Palace in Kuala Lumpur as well as the premises of the Ministry of Defence building. Primarily, the battalion's responsibilities are to perform public duties within the capital in support of state ceremonial events. Moving ahead, let's uncover the hidden gems within 5th Battalion Royal Malay Regiment and discover their significance. 5th Royal Malay was an allied regiment of the King's Own Scottish Borderers Regiment KOSB of the British Army's defunct Scottish Division. The alliance was formed during 1st NCOS's service in Malaya during the Malayan emergency. Several traditions of KOSB are retained by the 5th. The shoulder flash of officers and men of 5th follows the regimental facing colours of KOSB. 5th also maintains the tradition of having a pipe band. The tradition started when an officer of KOSB was seconded to 5th Royal Malay in 1953. Having raised its drumline during the battalion's formation. The Scottish officer introduced the bagpipe and helped train the pipers for the pipe band. Up until the disbandment of what was then the 1st Battalion Royal Scots Borderers of the Royal Regiment of Scotland in 2021 to form part of the Ranger Regiment of the British Army, the pipe bands of both infantry battalions maintained their alliance for 68 years, a tradition thus continued by the remaining pipes and drums of said regiment today. The 5th Battalion Pipes and Drums, in the past, been invited to attend the Edinburgh Festival. The last time 5th attended the festival was in January 1990, celebrating the COST's 300th anniversary. Moving on to the next segment, we have 6th Battalion Royal Malay Regiment. The 6th Battalion Royal Malay Regiment was formed on 1 May 1952 and later deployed to Quetta Camp in Tuong, Johor on 3 November 1952. Though formed on 1 May, the official date for the formation of the battalion is recorded as 3 November 1952. On its formation, the 6th Battalion had British officers from the 1st Battalion of the Dorset and Devonshire Regiment seconded to form the command corps of the battalion. The seconded officers were gradually replaced by Malay officers, and in early 1954, 21 of the 26 officers of the battalion consisted of Malay officers replacing their British counterparts. General Tun Ibrahim Ismail was the first Malay commanding officer of the battalion, taking command from 11 August 1958 until 14 June 1960. He later went on to become the first Malay Chief of the Malaysian Armed Forces, now called Chief of Defence Forces. The battalion is a standard infantry battalion of the Malaysian Army. The battalion has participated in the Christmas exercises with the New Zealand Army. The battalion was also deployed to the Congo as part of the Malayan Special Force serving under the United Nations Command. Get ready to immerse yourself in the world of 7th Battalion Royal Malay Regiment as we examine its impact and relevance. 7th Royal Malay Regiment is a mechanised unit of the RMR. It is currently allied with the Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment of the New Zealand Defence Force. It is currently based at Kubota Camp in Tawau, Sabah. Now, let's shift our perspective and explore 17th Battalion Royal Malay Regiment through a fresh lens, unlocking new perspectives. The 17th Battalion Royal Malay Regiment 17 RAND was formed on 1 August 1970. It is an elite force of paratroopers assigned to the Malaysian Army's 10th Parachute Brigade. On 10 October 1994, 17th PARA undertook a rapid deployment exercise supported by elements of the Malaysian Special Forces Group Garib Jarakas and PASKAL, as well as operational support from the Royal Malaysian Navy and Royal Malaysian Air Force. The exercise centered around a scenario of the retaking of Langkawi International Airport from an invading force by the Rapid Deployment Force spearheaded by the paratroopers. In this section, we'll be exploring 27th Battalion Royal Malay Regiment. Newly activated Standard Infantry Battalion, 27th Royal Malay Regiment 27 RAMD will be placed under the formation of the 5th Infantry Brigade, 5th Malaysian Infantry Division based at the west coast of Sabah, Malaysia. As we embark on the next leg of our journey, let's unpack the layers of Lieutenant Adnan bin Saidi and examine its core elements. Adnan Saidi led the reinforced 42-strong No Platoon of C Company, 1st Battalion of the Malay Regiment at the Bukit Chandu Opium Hill position on February 1942. Although heavily outnumbered, Adnan refused to surrender and urged his men to fight until the end. They held off the Japanese for 2 days amid heavy enemy shelling and shortages of food and ammunition. Adnan was shot but carried on fighting. After the battle was lost, the wounded Adnan was taken prisoner by Japanese soldiers, who tied him to a cherry tree and bayoneted him to death. According to some, he was also slashed and his body parts were burnt. Adnan epitomized the bravery and tenacity of the Malay Regiment. Because of this, he is considered a hero by many Malaysians and Singaporeans today. In this section, we'll be deep diving into Captain Hamid bin Awang, unraveling its complexities and uncovering valuable insights. Based on intelligence gathered indicating that a force of 40 to 50 communist guerrillas would converge on Ganongpo, D Company of 2nd Royal Malay Regiment led by Captain Hamid was tasked in a search and destroy mission. On April 7, 1973, Captain Hamid and his company detected a communist guerrilla encampment. He organized his company for an assault on the camp. Captain Hamid fired a round of grenade launcher to mark the start of the attack and rushed into the communist guerrillas' camp. In the heat of battle, a communist guerrilla tried to shoot down one of Captain Hamid's men. Captain Hamid immediately rushed to the guerrilla and hit him in the back of the neck with his grenade launcher's butt. Captain Hamid's company scored 3 kills and captured 3 enemy weapons, as well as ammunition and assorted equipment. Captain Hamid's company suffered 1 KIA. Captain Hamid was awarded the SP on 6 June 1973. Thanks for being a part of this amazing journey. I can't wait to bring you more exciting content.